Hey everyone, this is Dayu from EcommOps. Today we're going to talk about if you're running an e-commerce brand, why you should always consider fulfilling from China, shipping directly to your customers, even if you're using or considering using a US 3PL or local 3PL. We're going to talk about some of the benefits of fulfilling from China and some real numbers on how it can help your business. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why in the last couple of years China fulfillment has gotten so much better than before, and then we're going to talk about some tips on best utilizing China fulfillment for your business. Now, before we get started, I really do want to emphasize that we're not just talking about drop shipping here. We're talking about shipping and fulfilling from China, whether you're drop shipping or not. All right, let's get started. The benefits of using China fulfillment are very obvious. First, shipping is pretty efficient. You're going to be able to get as fast as 5 to 10 calendar days shipping to the US and many markets around the world. You're going to be able to experience extremely short lead times from your factory to a fulfillment center in China, which means that you can hold 90% less inventory or more actually, and you're going to be able to scale much more flexibly and have much lower risk in your cash investment in inventory. And you're going to be able to ship globally very profitably, and all of this is probably going to be cheaper than any kind of local fulfillment service. But let's actually do some math. So let's start with the lead time question. Let's assume that you have a product that you're paying $3 per unit for in terms of COGS. Let's assume that you are planning to sell or are selling 100 orders of it per day, and let's assume that there's no factory lead time, so we're just factoring in the freight lead time. In the traditional model, you might be using sea freight. Now, sea freight these days, you got to plan for maybe 60 days or so. So to be completely safe, you probably should plan around 90 days of inventory. Now, the simple math is you plan for 90 days of inventory. That's 90 times 100 orders per day times $3 on average for each unit. That's $27,000, 9,000 units in inventory that you have to plan ahead and therefore risk your cash and tie it up in inventory to support your order volume. In the other extreme, if you're fulfilling from China, anywhere in China to anywhere else, it's going to take a couple days. Let's assume 3 days for this purpose, and you might want to plan for 5 days of stock to be safe. And the math then is $3 per unit times 5 days worth of inventory times 100 orders per day. And that's only going to be $1,500 of inventory risk up front at any one time. I mean, that's more than a 90% reduction in how much inventory you have to hold. So it's a huge difference in the amount of cash flow that you need to hold. And in a similar vein, the much shorter lead time means that you have much more flexibility in scaling up. Let's just take the same scenario. You're selling at 100 orders per day and you have 9,000 units planned for 90 days. Now, let's just say your ads crush it and you start selling 1,000 units per day. Well, then you only have 9 days in inventory. All right. So what do? You sell out, and therefore you have to wait 90 days again, potentially, or 60 days again to get more inventory? Or do you choose to ramp down, which is obviously opportunity cost lost in potential sales? Whereas this is not a problem at all in China because the lead times are 3 days. You're planning for 5 days at a time. So you can very flexibly scale up in just days and allow you to scale up to thousands of orders per day within weeks time without really worrying about having to shut down or having to lose potential sales. Now we're actually going to run through some scenario analysis of different options of different example products and comparing between using US fulfillment and also China fulfillment. And I just want to give a little bit more background here. So for the US fulfillment piece, we're actually going to compare versus ShipBob. So ShipBob, they actually have a calculator that we can actually list below. So this is literally the cost that if you actually input into ShipBob's prices, and this is for their standard rates. Now, I will quickly say that ShipBob standard shipping is okay. Like if you use ShipBob before, their standard cheaper option is going to be 3 to 7 business days or something. So roughly speaking, it's like 1 or 2 weeks actually. So it's not that fast because they use a combination USPS and also cheaper economical services from FedEx and UPS, for example. But this is just the standard option they have. This is obviously not like their their 2-day shipping, which is a lot more expensive. We're going to compare versus 3 different example products. Now, I'm not going to be able to share the products with you, but these are actual products, their actual weights of the products, and their actual COGS value as well. All right. And just a quick note is that this data is as of the end of February or so, or early March. All right. So if you're watching this video much later than that and these numbers are not that accurate, well, you know why, because a lot of these numbers, especially freight and shipping prices, will change. All right. So I'm going to go through this analysis. We have 3 example products, one that weighs 30 grams, one that weighs 140 grams, and one that weighs 550 grams to show you a range of the different types of product weights. And here they are in ounces and their example COGS values as well. So first, let's start shipping from ShipOps. So we just plugged these numbers in and we got these numbers. Now in US fulfillment, one thing that you have to know is that there is going to be a range of prices based on the weight. So we have the range here, but we're just going to put the average here just for simplicity. This is shipping to the US within the US from ShipOps, assuming it's their US like LA location, for example. And the shipping time, let's assume 4 to 12 days or so. And this is very accurate because this is their standard economy shipping, around 4 to 12 calendar days. One thing that some folks don't realize when they compare costs is that, well, your products have to get to the US in the first place, so you have to consider the freight costs as well. And we actually laid out 4 different options for freight, 2 different types of air. One is just economy air freight, and the other type of air is just using something like DHL. It's going to be faster, but obviously more expensive. And the freight times are going to be different as well. And there's also going to be an economy sea, and there's also going to be a faster sea freight kind of option. And obviously all of these are different prices. So these are all real prices that your supplier or freight forwarder will probably quote you for this kind of product. One thing to note is that we are assuming just a relatively medium-sized batch of like say 1,000 units. Now these calculations do change if you're actually sending a container full, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about maybe a couple thousand units. Right now, we're going to assume that there's no customs fees. For some products, a lot of products, you have to consider customs as well. But right now, we're going to assume no customs just to simplify things, and we'll run some numbers with the customs as well. And this is right here, a total cost then of if you're using US fulfillment. So this is simply the cost of each of these freight options plus the cost of shipping within the US, plus the customs, which right now we just assume is 0 for now. All right, so these are the cost shipping using a US 3PL for different freight options. Now, here are the costs that we would quote a potential client shipping directly from China using EcommOps. There are 3 lines that we can use. One is going to be 5 to 10 days, calendar days. That's the express line. A regular line is cheaper. It's going to be 5 to 14 days or so. And there's an ordinary line that's going to be 6 to 16 days or so. So we're not going to compare versus the express line. We're going to compare versus our regular lines, the most comparable. And we're going to compare versus this. Now, if we actually look at this, I mean, this is basically what the difference is if you are fulfilling from China versus the calculations that we just did fulfilling from the US, assuming the freight as well. So as you see here, so green is where it's actually cheaper to fulfill from China. So you look at this here, I was actually a little bit surprised when I saw this actually, because even for some of the C options for the lighter products, it's actually going to be cheaper across the board to actually ship directly from China. Whereas for these slightly heavier products, as you see, it's actually cheaper than using something like DHL to actually ship directly from China versus shipping it to the US first. Now obviously for this option, this economy air is a little bit cheaper for this type of product, but still it's only 15 cents cheaper, so it's very, very similar. Now obviously if you're able to actually use C, that's where you're going to be able to see a lot of the bigger differences, but you know, these are going to take so much longer. I mean, this is like you're assuming you're adding like 60 days to the lead time, you're adding 45 days to the lead time from these options, right? And even these air options, you're still adding, you know, something like 7 to 14 days for DHL, sometimes for a larger order, or, you know, a couple weeks for economy air. Now, some of you might think, oh, like it doesn't take as long as that. Like, yes, well, try it out with a bulk order. If you're sending a sample via DHL, then it's pretty fast, right? But if you're sending out thousands of units via DHL or something like UPS or air freight line, you're gonna have to clear customs, gonna make it to your location. Like you should be assuming 7 to 14 days or so or longer for even air. Now, as you see, these costs, like, they're not that different. Like, especially if you're using air, mostly it's cheaper sending from China than sending it to your local 3PL. And there's also going to be, for sea, yes, that's where you get more savings. However, you're going to have to worry about the lead times like we just discussed. One other thing though is that's assuming no customs. All right, if you're sending thousands of units, you're gonna have to worry about customs. Now, traditionally, on average, you might be worrying about like a 25% custom rate on the COGS themselves. So if we assume that plugs in these numbers. So if you actually assume customs and import taxes, then the calculation is entirely different. Even some of the faster sea options get more expensive than if you actually ship directly from China. And if you ship directly from China, because it's shipped one package at a time, you're not actually paying the customs fee on a per order, because that's just how direct from China shipping works. So if you include customs and if you include freight and you actually do the math, then you'll see that actually shipping from China can be cheaper even than some of the sea freight options, and it's obviously a lot more flexible, and the shipping times are going to be close enough. And don't forget that you have to actually get the goods and consider this freight lead time to get to your 3PL and start fulfilling in the first place. And even if your customs rate is like, to say 15%, it's still cheaper to ship from China compared to something like air freight. Don't forget that also, if you're using a US 3PL, there's additional fees as well. There are usually warehouse fees. You have the storage fees here per bin, per shelf, per pallet. Now, traditionally for us and a lot of China fulfillment, we don't really charge for warehousing if your inventory turns like within 60 or 90 days, because space is a lot cheaper in China, to be completely honest, right? So you got to consider for these costs as well. And then usually something is ship out, they actually charge a receiving fee as well, which we usually don't. So these are costs that we didn't even consider, but if you add those up, that's actually going to add to your cost as well. Now, so that's US fulfillment to the US. Now let's take a look at international shipping. Let's look at international from the US to, let's say, to the UK. Yeah, this is crazy actually. So just using the UK as an example, this is ShipOps shipping internationally. It's going to be almost $11 for the 30 gram product, pretty similar for the 140 gram product, and $17 for the 550 gram product. And the shipping time is going to be weeks. I mean, it's super inefficient. It's going to take a while. Whereas UK shipping directly from China, just look at these prices. I'm not even going to put an equation to check this math here, but this is all cheaper. Even if you're using the express service, that's actually 4 to 8 days to the UK, these are significantly cheaper than shipping from the US to the UK. So this is also what I mean by you can ship globally and open up entire markets much more profitably shipping from China than from the US. I forgot to mention, this is, by the way, excluding freight. This is literally, if you ask ShipOps how much does it cost to ship from their 3PL to the UK, these are the prices. This is not even including the freight option, because there's no point, because we already know it's so much cheaper. So this is the math. This is the real math. If you're not convinced yet, I definitely advise you to check with your own freight costs, check with your own 3PL costs if you're using a US 3PL, and just see what the costs are. And if you want to talk to us and kind of figure out like how our costs compare for your specific product, definitely reach out below. All right, so let's now talk about a brief history of China shipping and fulfillment and why it's gotten so efficient recently. And I like to repeat, this is not just drop shipping. Just because you're shipping from China doesn't actually mean you're drop shipping. We have a lot of clients, actually most of our clients actually work with us who don't drop ship at all, and they actually just control their stock and customize their products and use us for fulfillment. That said, the rise of efficient China shipping really came from the initial boom in drop shipping and just platforms like AliExpress shipping to customers directly around the world. Because of that, in the last couple years, in the last 5-6 years or so, that's when couriers like Unit Express and 4PX and UBI really started or refined their direct shipping services, and they gotten much more efficient in terms of consistency consistency, in terms of times, and in terms of cost as well. And now you're going to be able to actually send, to the US, for example, as fast as 5 to 10 calendar days, very consistently in a very cost-effective manner. And actually, currently, UnExpress, for example, the majority of their volume is not actually supporting dropshipping. Guess what the most of their volume actually consists of? It's actually Amazon FBM. So they actually do the biggest portion of their business for Amazon FBM, which is one of the most strict in terms of shipping time and efficiency requirements. And in fact, although EcommOps started our business in dropshipping a couple years ago, now virtually none of our clients we work with in a traditional dropshipping model. More than 60% of our clients, they control their own stock, they work with their own factories, and they just send stock to us for fulfillment. And the other 40%, we do manage some of their supply chain, we help them source and develop products, but still, none of our clients are actually working in the traditional dropshipping anymore. So definitely China fulfillment does not mean dropshipping in this case, although obviously dropshipping in general help China fulfillment develop and make it more efficient. And it was through this experience that I realized through the years of just how powerful just being able to fulfill from China. And more recently, actually, we've had a lot more brands who have never really used China fulfillment. They never dropshipped before. They never even considered China fulfillment before. But because of all the benefits in terms of flexibility and cost, they are now actually much more shifting to the idea of China fulfillment. And we have some clients who were 100% US fulfillment, and now they're 100% China fulfillment for all of the benefits. All right, so now let's talk about some tips in actually how to best leverage China fulfillment for your business. So first of all, I hope that we clear the fact that there's nothing wrong with China fulfillment. There's a lot of benefits to it. I know the last couple of years, partly because of the COVID supply chain disruptions, there's been a lot of thinking that you have to invest in US fulfillment, local fulfillment to actually scale up. I mean, that's absolutely not true, and it's kind of the opposite as well. And especially if you're currently using China fulfillment, I would seriously reconsider if it actually makes sense for you to invest in US fulfillment or local fulfillment, unless you're doing so much volume that you can actually fill up containers and just constantly send containers to your local 3PL, which is then when it starts to make more sense. Now, obviously, there are some obvious benefits in fulfillment from the US. First, if you really want like 2-day express shipping, you're not gonna get that from China. It's just literally physically impossible. So if you want that and pay a lot more for it, then of course you probably want some US fulfillment as well. Another benefit is that it can definitely help you to have US fulfillment or local fulfillment during times where it's just not feasible to fulfill from China. Chinese holidays, for example, during Chinese New Year's, any other supply chain disruptions. If you don't want to, wait the 10 days that there are going to be logistics pauses from China during Chinese New Year. If you are actually able to book full containers and constant full containers, and you have a great way to project your volume to be able to have that make sense with less risk, then it certainly makes sense. And then finally, there's simply certain products that just can't be fulfilled from China. Stuff that's more sensitive, dangerous goods, stuff that's oversized or very heavy, they just don't make sense to actually ship from China. However, though, I want to emphasize this, that the decision doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be one or the other. If it makes sense for you, I think that one potential optimal is that, especially if you can actually have enough volume to fill up containers on sea, what you can do is actually send occasional containers to get the best average cost possible, because if you can fill up a container, that's how you can get the best cost possible. Now, you don't have to overstock. You can understock actually, because then you have a backup plan from your China fulfillment center. And if you're waiting for your container to arrive or you run out of stock, then you can continue to actually ship from China for a slightly more expensive cost, obviously, but still you're getting the average cost savings from those containers that you're sending to your 3PL. And of course, anywhere else in the world, international shipping is going to be really bad from 3PLs locally. So everything else in the world, in Europe, UK, whatever, that's where you're shipping from China directly. And by the way, if you're not doing that already, if you're not shipping around the world and marketing around the world because you're stuck with a US 3PL, consider it. Like, we have some clients who are stuck to US markets, and as soon as they were able to market and ship to international markets, their sales would increase by like 30, 40, 50% immediately, because it opens up entire new markets for them. And by the way, this is something that actually we at EcommOps are actually planning for this year. We do actually plan to have a mixed model where we have our own US fulfillment center, and we help you organize freight, and we also help you ship directly from China as well, so you get the best of both worlds. So look out for that in the second half of 2022. Now, if you are doing something like this, if you're using a mixed model, then there's a couple key points that you really need to be aware of. You have to have a great system to really figure out who is actually fulfilling from where. Now, I think most US 3PLs are going to be able to do this, and at least we at EcommOps can do this as well, but we do a lot of technical development to make this happen. But what you can do is say, hey, your US orders, for example, are only shipped through your US 3PL, and we only ship your international orders. And if your US 3PL runs out of stock, you tell us through some system starting at an order number that we fulfill then to the US while you're waiting for stock, and the opposite when you have US stock that has arrived, that we pause at a certain order number. Another way that you can do it is you can actually set different types of shipping methods in Shopify, for example, for different types of options. For example, if you have a express option that only ships from the US, just call it like 2 to 5 day express, whatever it is, and then we can actually ignore anything that has a shipping option and only ship your standard shipping from China. And some additional tips to work with a fulfillment center from China. First one is location is incredibly important. You really want to work with a fulfillment center that's based in Shenzhen. I've talked about other videos about this in my Yuan Express videos, but Shenzhen is by far the most efficient location for international shipping from China because its proximity to Hong Kong, and most of the major couriers have headquarters there. So do not use a fulfillment center that's based anywhere else if you want the most efficient shipping. One important point is that with your fulfillment center in China, make sure you communicate the product, ideally send a sample to them before you actually start shipping out, because there are going to be certain cases where there are going to be issues with shipping a particular product. It might be not shippable, or it has to use a special line if it has liquids, for example. So if you want no surprises, definitely communicate with your fulfillment center beforehand. Make sure they actually have a real warehouse. I mean, there are a bunch of smaller previous dropshipping agents that are getting into fulfillment right now, and they don't really have a warehouse. If you want to scale and get all the benefits of this process, you can't be working with someone that is just, fulfilling out of their bedroom or their garage, for example. Make sure that they actually have a quick and accurate receiving process. We normally just can receive like tens of thousands of units in like a day or like half a day, but if that requires a lot of labor though. But if your fulfillment center takes like 3 days to process something, then it completely defeats the purpose of how fast the lead time is. So make sure they have a very efficient receiving process that they can just receive goods and start processing the next day. Make sure that you really understand and work with your fulfillment center to understand all of the different shipping methods and communicate that effectively with your customers as well. Just one quick example is that Yuan Express has technically it has like 10 different lines, right? Not all of them are relevant to you. There's probably 3 lines that really make sense for the average e-commerce brand. However, a lot of suppliers, they don't really tell you that. They just have one version and call it the Express, for example. So you really need to work with your supplier, understand all the different options, because they cost differently. They can send different things, and they have different speeds as well. And that's going to be really important for you to understand these options and obviously manage those expectations in shipping times to your customers, and also have the most cost efficiency in choosing the right line. That's it for this video. Hope that was helpful, guys. I really think that more and more China fulfillment is going to get ever more efficient, and it's really a great option to ship all of your orders, or at least supplement your local fulfillment if that's something that you're using right now. And if you are interested in working with EcommOps, we do have an MOQ of 30 orders per day. So if you are interested in working with us, please let us know, and I'll leave the link below. And if we're a good fit, then we'll definitely get back to you and start the process. Join our Facebook community for the most up-to-date news on supply chain and logistics discussions. We also have a free course as well on the entire supply chain in China, so I'll link to that below. Until next time, this is Dayu from EcommOps. See you guys later.